I pose a question. Infection, prevention, and control. Are human beings the problem or the solution? And I'm going to spend the next 20 or 25 minutes talking to you about human performance, the reliance that we place on people, and how we can get a better understanding of things like errors, mistakes, non-compliance in safety-critical working environments. The ancient Greeks had a phrase, pathomata mathemata. Translated, that means guide your learning through pain and suffering, or literally translated, learning the hard way. Now, we don't want to do that. Unfortunately, I've had that experience in my career. So I'm going to explain a little bit about why I'm stood here talking to you about this subject that I am this afternoon. So I started off my career about 35 years ago, in the military. And quite quickly, I found myself as part of a British Army Special Forces unit, high-performing unit, giving terrorists a hard time around the world in various different places. And over the 3 or 4 years that I was with British Army Special Forces, we lost 3 people to unexpected fatal incidents. Not enemy action, avoidable, unnecessary, unexpected incidents. The first one was a fatal accident on a firing range during a training exercise, where a young lad was shot dead during the training exercise because of a breakdown of communication at local level. Very, very human reasons why the accident happened. About a year later, we had a lad that was on operations for about 33 hours, been awake for a very long time. He was allowed to get into a car and drive back to barracks at the end of that period of time on operations. Probably unsurprisingly, he fell asleep at the wheel, drove off a bridge into a river, died in the accident along with his highly trained German Shepherd. And then a year later, we had a suicide on the unit. And it had a profound effect on me. It got me thinking about why these things happen to people in organizations that have a duty of care. How are we looking after our people? Do we really understand human behavior and human performance in the way that we should? So if I fast forward my career from there, about 20 years, I had the huge privilege of being the chief engineer for the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows. And I had a 400-mile-an-hour office, flying around in the back seat of a Red Arrows jet, all over the world, doing some fantastic things, meeting some amazing people, going to some amazing places. But I was also there in 2011 when we had 2 fatal accidents. The first accident was at Bournemouth Air Show, where a lad called John Egging lost consciousness in the cockpit of the aircraft due to the G-forces that he was exposed to during the flight. And then 13 weeks later, we had a second fatal accident where an ejection seat, which is a piece of safety equipment fitted to the aircraft, malfunctioned on the ground and killed another of the pilots called Sean Cunningham. So we had 2 fatal accidents in the space of 13 weeks. And as a result of that second accident, I was the chief engineer. It was equipment that I was responsible for. I felt some kind of personal accountability for what had happened. I had to stand in coroner's courts and explain my actions and inactions to bereaved family, press, media, colleagues. The hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, never mind my career. So I've been through that pathomata mathemata that the Greeks talk about. As a result of those experiences, I got together with a group of like-minded people who've all been personally affected by safety. We've lost friends, in some cases family, to unnecessary, unexpected, and avoidable accidents in the workplace. So GMR Human Performance was formed as a result of these kinds of experiences. We wanted to work with organizations to prevent these bad things from happening in the first place through gaining a better understanding of the human condition that affects us all. So that's why we do what we do. And I think that's an important place to start, to explain why I'm stood here talking to you all about human factors, human performance, and the human condition more generally. There's a phrase there from Professor James Reason. Any system or process that requires perfect human performance is flawed. Why is that? It's because we're all fallible, isn't it? About 15 to 20% of everything that we do every day as a human being is done in error. Whether it's misplacing your car keys, pushing on a pool door, or think about something that we do in a healthcare setting every single day. About 15 to 20% of what we do each day is done in error. We are fallible creatures. It is part of the human condition. Okay? So we can't expect perfect performance. One of the big challenges that we see across lots of different industries, and I work with aviation, I work with nuclear, with construction, oil and gas, water and energy, healthcare. We did a program with maternity a couple of years ago. Alignment of thinking, alignment of intent, alignment of understanding. It's a real challenge. If I posed what seemed like simple questions, what is safety? What is risk? What is equality? All these things that we think we understand every day. Everybody in the room will have a different understanding or a different perception of what those things mean based on your background, your training, your values, your beliefs. All of these things play into our understandings and our perceptions of words like safety. It means something different to everybody. So when we start talking about safety initiatives and ways to improve an organization, getting people onto that same page, to use the cliche, is a huge challenge. Think about the fragmented nature of the NHS now with trusts and health boards. How do we get traction and coherence across that kind of organization with something like human factors and human performance? We all have different priorities, different challenges, different organizational priorities, different understandings. Very, very difficult to get that alignment. And that's a great place to start. Are we all thinking on the same page? How do we get people and keep people on the same page? On your best day, when you're stood in the bathroom in the morning having a shave, brushing your hair, putting your makeup on, all three in my case, obviously, you are 80% good on your best day, okay? Because of that fallibility. And then as you go through the working day, all those performance-influencing factors start to degrade your performance. All the things that you are faced with at work, organizational factors, systemic factors, cultural factors, informational factors, the personal factors that we are all dealing with every day, taking the dog to the vet, worrying about a relative who's not very well, child's sick at school. All these things are factors that influence our attention and how we perform each and every day at work. And we all have them. And they're different for all of us. And they affect us all differently. But it's normal. You get to about 15 or 16 hours of wakeful time. This is not time at work. This is wakeful time from when you've woken up in the morning. There is a real cliff edge to your performance. At that 15 to 16 hour point, we are not performing to the way that we should be. Seriously degraded performance. 5 principles of human performance. These are taken from Todd Conklin. They come from the nuclear industry, but they are prevalent to every organization. 5 principles of human performance. And I'll go through each one of these briefly in turn. Human error is normal. We've already talked about the fact that 15 to 20% of everything that people do every day is done in error. All these influencing factors that cause us to make errors, to make mistakes. We've got to get away from seeing the person as the problem. Everyone makes errors. Everyone makes mistakes. It's those influencing factors that shape the way we perform, the way we act, the decisions that we take every day, the actions that we take in the workplace. Human error is a normal part of the human condition. How can we blame somebody for something they didn't intend to do in the first place? Nobody intends to make an error. You are all professional people, professionally qualified people. You have pins to protect. You are qualified doctors. You are highly qualified people who've spent years training to get where you are in your careers. Nobody comes to work to do a bad job. but errors and mistakes still happen. And we need to take the time to understand why those errors and mistakes take place. Isn't blame a delicious emotion? Makes us feel good. Blaming somebody else for something that's gone wrong, something that's happened. It appeases corporate guilt. It distracts the attention and places it somewhere else. It looks like we're taking action and doing something about the problem because we blame somebody for something that's happened. Blame fixes nothing, as we know. We don't learn if we blame. So we need to adopt a learning mindset and learn from the things that happen. When there's an error is an opportunity to learn. To lift up the corners of the carpet in the organization and say, what's really going on under there? What's really happening in the organization? It's an opportunity to learn. And we have to grab those opportunities. The Industrial Revolution happened because people were tinkering away in their garages and houses, setting fire to themselves, blowing themselves up, hurting themselves in all sorts of strange ways while we developed technology. We didn't have systems and processes in place first to say, right, we're ready, let's have the Industrial Revolution. We learned from the errors that we made. Penicillin, as we all know, was the result of an error. That beautiful serendipity that's led to penicillin. One of the ways we learn is through errors and mistakes. We have to embrace it as a learning opportunity, not see it as a bad thing and blame people. You will all have heard of just culture. Part of the problem is the name. The word just conjures up images of culpability, fault, blame, justice. That's not what this is about. And you've probably all been beaten around the head for the last 30 years with culture change. Probably fed up of hearing that. This is all about competency. Giving people the competency to understand why this is important. Change will happen naturally if we can give people the competency to understand errors, mistakes, and human performance. The primary purpose of a just culture is not to allocate blame. It's not to point the finger. The primary purpose is to understand the behavior, to understand why things happened in the first place, to learn, to prevent recurrence. And a phrase I'd like you to take away is to balance accountability. It's not a no-blame culture. People are still accountable for their actions and decisions. But it's balancing that accountability against the influencing factors that caused that individual to make the decision that they did, because it made sense to them at the time with the information they had available. So we're talking about balanced accountability. That's an important phrase. Learning is vital. If we want to improve safety in IPC, if we want to improve our systems, our processes, our controls, we need to learn why things aren't going to plan. So taking the time to listen and learn, having some good investigation skills in your department, people that can do thorough, robust investigations, learning reviews as we call them, is really, really key. If we don't get to the root cause of an issue, we'll never prevent it happening again properly. So the things that we do as an organization supports things like PSERF, SEEPS, DATIX. We give your people the confidence and the competence and the skills and the techniques and the tools to do this stuff really well, because that's what it's all about. What a horrible busy slide that is. I don't think it's officially approved. It's something I found on LinkedIn. And it's, as it says, the NHS tube map. It's a bit like the underground map for London. The point of putting it up here is to show that what you do as a health service, as a private hospital, as a board, as a trust, is incredibly complex. The context of what you do changes all the time. Think about your procedures, your processes. Are they robust? to allow for the different contexts of what you do, the different environments that you do jobs in. We rely hugely on people to fill in the gaps where there is no process or procedure. We can typically proceduralize about 80% of what we do. What happens to the other 20%? We rely on people to make decisions, to make these adaptations, concessions, waivers, easements. And we're relying on people to get that outcome that we want. And most of the time, guess what? It goes really well. And we do it right, and we get the outcome that we want. But occasionally, we get the unexpected outcome. We have the event or the incident or the occurrence, and we focus on that one point in time that didn't go right. What about the other 99 times that it did go right beforehand? How much are we learning from the times that things go right? Or are we just focusing on the one time that something went wrong? Do we understand why things go right most of the time? Because they do. And these adaptations that people make every day in the workplace, these waivers and concessions that I've talked about, they're not bad things necessarily. They're necessary for people to get the job done. People come to work to do the best they can, make decisions in very difficult, challenging environments. And they do what makes sense to them at the time, with the information they have available at the time. And usually, we get the outcome that we want. Never be judgmental. Truth is often stranger than fiction. I've probably been involved with hundreds of investigations in my career in different industries, and the truth is often stranger than fiction. People behave the way they do for all sorts of reasons, and we have to take the time to understand why. What were the influences that caused people to act or think or behave or decide in the way that they did? Because there will always be a reason. That's the gold dust that we need to start to improve incrementally the safety and the performance of our organizations. Taking the time to listen and learn and understand. Never be judgmental. In my experience, people rarely come to work to do a bad job. People will be mortified that they've made an error or made a mistake, particularly if we're talking about a professional nurse, a professional doctor, whoever it might be, who may have caused harm to somebody. They will be mortified that that's happened. We've got to think about that. So what is human error? Very simply then, an action that doesn't go according to plan, obviously, but it's unintended. An error is an unintended act with an unintended outcome. And it's important to say that it's unintended. Because if it's unintended, you can't train people or brief people not to do it again. Because they didn't intend to do it in the first place. So we have to start looking at the systems and the processes in the organization if we're really going to learn and fix the problems that we have. And human error is generally a symptom of something else in the system, not a cause in itself. 3 photos at the bottom, leaving a surgical instrument inside somebody, an air crash, or a lorry driver getting his lorry stuck under a low bridge. None of that was intentional, but it happened anyway. Because we're human. Let's not blame people for being human. Let's give them permission to be human and learn from it. Have that questioning mindset. Chronic unease doesn't mean you're sitting there biting your fingernails, awake every night, worrying about everything, but it is about challenging your working environment, having the courage and the integrity to question when something doesn't make sense. Feeling confident to step forward and say, let's just think about this. Why are we doing it this way? Let's just stop and pause. Take the time to really understand whether this is the right course of action. Something doesn't feel right here. You're professional people. You know when something is wrong in your organization. Have the courage to say so. Easy to say in a lecture like this, isn't it? Very difficult to do in the real world. I've been there. I understand. What's that telling us? We have a process. Think of something in healthcare, in IPC, whatever the process might be. And it's written down with steps that you've got to take along the way. A to B at the top. That's the work as planned or the work as imagined. The reality in the workplace, the work as done, is far more complex. People can't follow the procedures for all sorts of reasons. They don't have the competency. They don't have the understanding. They don't know where the procedure is in the first place. The procedure can't be followed the way that it's been written. They haven't got the tools. They haven't got the time. They haven't got the resources. All of these things are the influencing factors in the organization that mean a procedure may not be followed in the way that it should be. And there are lots and lots of different reasons. Most of the time, people will make these adaptations and concessions and waivers and easements that we've talked about, and they will get to the right outcome, and it's normally successful. But occasionally, we have the bad outcome. And we have to recognize that is the reality, that work as done is different to work as imagined. And I can guarantee you it's going on in all of your health boards and trusts and hospitals right now today. Organizational drift, practical drift, it's taking place, it's alive and well out in the real world. And we have to understand that that is normal in an organization. And we have to be comfortable with it in order to learn. And that's just a more formal way of looking at the same thing. Work is imagined at the top, and we drift away and we do things in a slightly different way over time because of all these influencing factors that cause us not to follow the procedure. And there's books written about this. This is open source information. It's not anything that's protected for GMR. But recognizing that's a reality is really important. And we are all, thankfully, variable, random, a bit uncertain at times, unpredictable, and we're all fallible. We've got to see that as a good thing, not a bad thing, because it's part of the human condition. And we all suffer it, or benefit from it, depending on your point of view. And that affects the decisions and the actions that we take every day. People have a choice. But that choice, those decisions, are influenced by all sorts of things. As we've said, we make adaptations, we make concessions. Sometimes that leads to non-compliance. Doesn't mean we're bad people. Doesn't make those people bad people. They are getting the job done to the best of their ability. Beware of hindsight bias. Easy to judge people on what we think they should have done after the event. They may not have had the full information at that time. We need to see the world through their eyes when they were doing the job with the information they had available at the time to really understand what was going on. Value judgments. Beware of things like, that was a poor decision, that was a bad action, because quite often it only appears that way with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, it would have made sense to the people doing the job. We've got to take the time to understand why. And counterfactuals. You see these in reports, incident reports all the time. Could have, should have, would have. They could have done that to avoid the incident. But they didn't. And we need to understand why. It doesn't help anybody by saying they could have done this or should have done that if that's not what happened. But you see reports with these kinds of words or language in them all the time. It doesn't help learning. So beware of things like counterfactuals and value judgments. My career's been spent trying to understand human performance. Humans are fascinating creatures. Sometimes they can be perceived to be the problem. Sometimes they can be perceived to be the solution. For me, there are periods of time when they're both. We've got to take the time to put people at the center of what we do. We rely on our people for an outcome. Let's take the time to look after them properly. That's why human factors, human performance is so important.